Good morning, my sisters and brothers who are present. It is so good to see you be together. Turn and just shake the sister's hand next to you. Say, girl, it's good to be here with you. And if it's a guy, say, brother, it's good to be here with you too. So it is in my honor and privilege to moderate this panel, She Too, leaning in as a woman of color. You know, years ago, Sheryl Sandberg says we've got to lean in, and I said we've got to get in before we can lean in. So my name is Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook, Susan with a Z. They call me Ambassador Sue J. And for 4.5 years, I had the privilege of working with one of the baddest men on the planet, President Barack Hussein Obama. Woo! I was his first female, first African-American, and first faith leader to be the United States Ambassador for International Religious Freedom, which meant I had all 199 countries. I lived in Washington and went all over the world representing the President and the Secretary of State. So it was my privilege and honor to serve him and you, our American people, and to have that experience working for the first African-American president, number 44. Amen. And I am joined today by a dynamic panel. To my left and your right is Thea Smith, and she is a leadership champion in Atlanta. She was named one of Atlanta's top 40 under 40, featured as a 2017 Superwoman by the Atlanta Tribune magazine, and she serves on the leadership committee of Startup Runway. And in just a few minutes, you'll be able to hear a little bit more about what she's doing right now. But can you join me in welcoming Thea Smith? And next to her is Her Excellency, Justina Matale. She's the founder of the Matale Foundation. She was named on the Power List, top 100 most influential and inspirational people in Britain, and globally acclaimed, one of the most influential and inspirational people of African descent and origin. Won't you join me in welcoming the Honorable Justina Matale, Her Excellency. And to her left, to my left, your right, extreme right, is Maggie Linton, who is a radio superstar, a multi-award winning broadcaster, 46 years of experience. She was the first female of color, first female to begin as a sports announcer in her native Kansas, then went on to other countries, St. Louis, D.C., WTTG. She's got grown kids, she's a grandma, and she's got it going on. She just moderated the last session of Global Forum here, and won't you join me in welcoming Maggie Linton. And won't you just join me in putting our hands together? This is one of the best. I've been all over the globe. I've been to all the initiatives. I've been to all the caucuses, all the forums. But this is one of the baddest forums ever put together. Let's give a shout out to John Hope Bryant and his whole team for the Hope Global Forums. Have you been blessed over? Hasn't it been awesome? And I hope you will listen to the words he said at the end of the last one. He says, don't walk by without speaking to someone and introducing yourself. This is networking. This is embracing. You don't know where your next job, your next opportunity, your next president. You may be sitting next to the next president. Turn to tell somebody, girl, I'm glad I'm sitting next to you. You don't have a clue where I'm going to. But there's just power in this room and in this place. So I want to thank John. I sat next to him on a plane 10 years ago when he just had an idea for something like this. And so now, look at 10 years later, what has blossomed into really a global forum. But I've asked each of my presenters to join me. Share one thing, the top thing, a highlight that you're working on now that you'd like the sisters to know about.
Oh, I'm on. So the one thing I'm working on right now, first of all, just good morning, everyone. I have to reiterate that this is an incredible opportunity and an experience, and I hope no one in this room takes for granted how privileged we are to be sitting amongst such incredible leadership and thought innovators happening right here in Atlanta. And that's honestly what I'm most excited about. I'm excited that Atlanta is really leading in terms of being first to the future on so many of the issues that are affecting women, particularly women of color. I sit at the helm of the Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative, which to date is the only city-funded initiative of its kind anywhere in this country to support women entrepreneurs. And so it really just energizes me when I wake up and think about the work that is happening in Atlanta, to know that we are really sitting at the cusp of change, and that so many of us doing the work in Atlanta are involved in what will ultimately be history that we are living right now. I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be in this city and to have the opportunities that we do.
Thank you. And Her Excellency.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for coming here to listen to us. It's an honor to have you listen to what we have to say. I just want to say that if there's one thing that a woman can do, it's many things. So I cannot flag out just the one thing I'm excited about. I'm excited about so many things. With my work, we have a program, a scholarship program, to take to university underprivileged young women from Africa. And you know, Africa is predominantly black or women and girls of color. So that is what we are doing. Another thing we are doing in London, I'm based in London. I am from Zambia, which is in Africa. We have a global convention of women in business, trade, and enterprise that brings together women from all over the world to inspire them, to motivate them, and to empower them to be able to navigate the global economic landscape, and for them to have a foot onto that economic ladder so that they can lean in or shove off over the men. And another thing that I think is very important, we've just come from the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, and there we launched the African Suffragettes, a journey of African hidden figures through the decades, is to flag out those women of color from Africa who fought for the rights of their people and the rights of women and girls, who have so much been left out of the history books. And if we go back, if we want to lean in as women of color, we've got to go back and get in touch with those women. We've got to feel them into ourselves. They live within us. If we can get in touch with them from our core, then we should be able to surge forth. Thank you.
Thank you. And Maggie Linton, we met via telephone
Yes,
back
we did.
then, and then radio. So you're doing such a great job, and thank you. You did a phenomenal job this morning in moderating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, let's give her some love. Come on, give it up. Celebrate a sister.
Thank you.
Yes.
One of the things I have to tell you, if you have not read Soul Sisters, which is Ambassador Cooks Johnson's, you have to get it, because she interviewed. I know I'm going to still tell you what I'm going to do, what I want to do, and what I'm working on now. But it is one of the most awe-inspiring books I have ever read, and it's still on my top 10. Because what she did is interviewed a number of women, those you know, those you don't know, some you should know, and had them tell their stories of how they got to their greatness. It's called Soul Sisters. Go find it and buy it and be inspired.
Thank you so
that's
much.
my commercial for you.
You can have 2 minutes, girl.
Okay.
Come on, thank you. I appreciate it.
One of the things I'm working on, of course, I've had 46 years in broadcasting, but even beyond that, now I have also started a second career in insurance, financial insurance, through a company called First Financial Security, based right here in Norcross, Georgia, which is a suburb. And one of the things I want to do, and which I have preached, and which my parents taught us all our lives, is be financially secure. And way too often, when we start jobs, we're busy paying off student loans or whatever, instead of securing our future. Do you realize that if you take $50 a month, and a lot of people spend that much in 1 week buying Starbucks, that you can have $600 at the end of that year. If you take that $600 and put it into anything that gives you any kind of interest, you have more than $600. And so we must learn how to manage our money. It's not about going to get the latest hair. It's not about getting your nails. It's not about buying the latest fashions or the top shoes. It is getting financially secure. And with that, you can move forward. When I read in the paper one day, this woman, 85 years old, lived in West Virginia. She was about to lose her home over $460. Why? Because she hadn't planned for the future. The future is now, and the road that you lay down is so important, and that's my passion right now, is finances.
So important, so important. Yes, let's give it up for Maggie. So when Sheryl Sandberg was talking about leaning in, I created an organization called Pro Voice Movement for Women, and the website is provoiceinternational.org, because I said we can't lean in until we get in. And no matter what, for women of color, it's always hard. Even as an ambassador, every white woman who was an ambassador had a job waiting for them when they left. We have to figure out how to leverage our jobs and get something afterwards. So what do you think is the biggest prohibitor to women of color leaning in and getting in? Thea?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Sheryl Sandberg and leaning in, because I remember when that first came out, and I took such issue with it. I thought that it was a bit inaccurate in the way she captured what leaning in looked like. And obviously she did it through her lens. But what it failed to do was recognize that the reality and the dynamics for women of color in particular when it comes to leaning in are vastly different than what is often the path for white women, which is that of privilege.
Yes.
And so when Sheryl Sandberg became a widow and a single mother on the same day when she lost her husband, she talked from there on about realizing that much of what she wrote in Lean In was inaccurate, because she came from the perspective that you have a partner, a willing partner, who is there to help you lean in. And she said, until I became a widow and a single mother on the same day, I had no appreciation for the reality that leaning in is not really an accurate thing to do. And for African American women, or women of color overall in general, we know that those are some really disparate numbers in terms of single women, in terms of single mothers. And so if you look at the reality for us, where often our numbers are much more higher in terms of not having a partner in the home, not having a partner who can be there to help you on a path around leaning in, you know that that's not really an accurate statement. And so, I remember when she made that, when she first talked about how she was inaccurate in that statement, and she addressed the fact that as a privileged white woman, she had the ability to speak to that and have her position validated. And I wish there was the same for us. I wish black women in particular had more of an opportunity to have our circumstances validated by ourselves without always needing that validation to come from others. So I think my charge would be for us to start really owning that our stories and our trajectories and our journeys are okay. And it's okay for us to own them and to authenticate them without having to have the validation of the majority. But leaning in is not something that I think is realistic to us, especially when we consider a lot of the dynamics around racism, around sexism that we still face on much more inherent levels than our majority counterparts.
Thank you. Maggie, how can we lean in? How can we validate those stories that Thea talks about?
Well, I have to tell you, I refer back to my parents who, when we were growing up, and my sister and I would say, well, we can't do it. And by the way, my sister is sitting over there, Lester Pryor.
Raise your hand, sister. Okay, we got to see folk. We women of color. We got to see you. Okay.
One of the things that
In fact, they say stand up in the church. Stand up so we can see you. Come on, give her sister a hand. All right, there you go.
We were blessed that we had very forward-thinking parents. And the one thing that they told us all the time, every time we said we can't, they said being black and a woman is not a reason for failure. It's a reason for success. So that was what was running through my head and ran through my sister's head all the time. When I started a career, and by the way, I changed careers 5 times, trying to figure out what I wanted to do while I was in school.
Yes.
And I got into sports broadcasting, which is a male-dominated field.
Yeah.
Okay? And a lot of people said, well, you can't do sports. There's no women out there, because this was a long time ago. Now you see women everywhere. But I never let that stop me from going into a locker room, from getting that interview, because that's the way we have to move our lives, is through a positive. Not a can't, but yes, I can. And we've heard yes, I can a lot. And we have to tell our own narratives and often build our own base. Don't be jealous of some woman that may be ahead of you. You move ahead of them. You move forward. You have to. We can't wait for somebody to give us something. And when I say that, way too many of us are sitting there going, well, I can't do this because I'm waiting on somebody. Create your own path. Others will follow.
Sounds great.
The road is wide open. The journey is for us. And I just kept moving forward. But at the same time, I was reaching back, trying to help others. Way too often, we're too self-centered. And we're jealous of what somebody else has. Be proud of them. I think about Oprah. Oprah Winfrey was my first competition when I moved to Baltimore, Maryland. you know? And her makeup artist, Reggie Wells, was my makeup artist on my show before, and he begged Oprah every day about, let me come over and do your makeup, okay? But when she moved to Chicago, guess who became her makeup artist? Reggie, okay? Reggie and I used to ride up to New York. His grandmother lived around the corner from my sister in Manhattan. We would talk about our dreams. Your dreams can come true if you have them. Don't limit them.
On the global stage, Your Excellency, what are some of the things that you're seeing for women of color? Is it as intense as it is for women in the United States?
I come from a different perspective. I grew up in Africa. I worked in Africa, and like I said before, in Africa is predominantly people of color, so we didn't see these. Our presidents have always been black, by the way.
Say it, girl. We ain't mad at you.
Yeah, and we do have quite a lot of women in high-profile places. For example, from my country, Zambia, we have a woman vice president, we have a woman head of the judiciary, woman head of the police, woman head of the central bank. So it is almost usual. There's no, and when I was growing up, for example, as a gender activist, I found this thing saying that if a family is given a choice between sending a boy child or a girl child to school, they would take the boy child to school. But I didn't grow up like that. In my family, as soon as you were of school-going age, you had to go to school. It didn't matter whether you're a boy or a girl.
Great parents.
Yes. So I need to take a few things back. Prior to colonization, you know, African women, black women from whom we are all descendants of, were equal or even more superior to their men. What upset the tables was when was the colonization, when the economy changed from subsistence economy to the monetary economy, and the men had to go to work. So then the men became the breadwinners, and that upset the tables. So the women lost their place, and they lost claim to a lot of things, a lot of resources, including land, because of the rules that were brought up by colonization. And I see that, of course, I acknowledge that there's institutional discrimination where women are concerned on the global stage, and it also penetrated into the African society because of the colonization and globalization. But as women, I think we need to sort of have unshakable self-belief in ourselves and see ourselves as just people, not as a woman, and definitely not as a woman of color, just as a person who wants to do this job, who wants to become this managing director or CEO of this. If you go with that mindset, you'll definitely be able to climb up the ladder. But if each time you're looking at yourself as a woman of color, as a woman, then already in your mind, it's giving you that limitation, limiting beliefs. Those are limiting beliefs.
Let's talk about claiming your place in your space, going back to now where women are claiming that. What is one tip, Maggie, Your Excellency, Thea, one tip you would give women to claim what you've got, claim that power within? Maggie, I'll start with you.
Don't accept less. Nowadays, I have to give the example of the women's hockey team, U.S. gold, you know, in the Olympics.
Yes.
They found out how much less they were getting supported by the Olympics. And they said, okay, you know what? We don't get the money. We don't get the same support. We will not play. Well, that can't be the same for everybody, but you have to go in at least asking for equality. Knowing that you may have to start out at less, but at least let them know. For 4 years, I didn't get a raise in my job. But every time I saw my boss, I reminded him, okay? And so at the end of that reminding period, when they finally said, okay, raises are not frozen anymore, we're gonna start getting it, I got a $20,000 raise and 71,000 shares of stock, okay? So if you don't remind them, if you don't needle them, they're never gonna know.
And when
You can't tell your friends you wish you had more, you gotta ask for it.
Now, when somebody says something profound, we say, "You go, girl." So on that one, you go, girl. All right. Your Excellency, one thing that you think in terms of women claiming their rightful place.
I think we've got to start by unlearning the social conditioning that has put limits on what we can do, that has put limits on our potential. And yesterday, I was very inspired from the young entrepreneurs that were pitching their businesses. I did something similar to that. I worked for a long time in an international development organization, similar to the United Nations, but it's called the Commonwealth Secretariat. It's a group of countries that used to be colonies of the British Empire, of course. So I had a brilliant job. It was a jet-setting job, but somehow I felt that I wasn't satisfied with what I needed to give to the company because I had to follow all these rules. So I got out of there and set up on my own. And by doing so, I became the master of that boardroom, the boardroom we are all trying to get into. So yesterday, the young people reminded me of that. I saw them jumping there. I saw one girl who said, "I am the CEO, I am the CFO, and I'm also the only employee." But automatically,
That's all right. Yes, exactly.
she is right on top of there. So we've got some time to think away from looking for employment in the corporate industry, but creating our own corporates. I am working with a group of women from Africa. We are trying to create the African Women Development Bank. We will be at the top of that corporate.
Wonderful.
We do not have to seek or to try and navigate the men around there.
Say, "You go, girl."
You go, girl.
Turn to the sister beside you, say, "Create it," if it's not there. All right. Which brings us right to Thea. What are you telling your top 40, under 40? You're doing entrepreneurship, Project Runway. What are you telling the young women who are coming up in terms of how to get to the table? Not just lean in, how do they get in?
Well, I think it's important to remember that, or to know that you can be uncomfortable being underestimated. I think we need to get better being uncomfortable being underestimated, being comfortable being underestimated. I think oftentimes we are waiting to be validated and we are waiting to have people acknowledge and celebrate our success and our achievements who don't look like us and who often, through our lens, don't understand what we're trying to do. But the more time we waste on that, the less time we actually spend on real action. And so if you remember, for instance, the Alabama State Senate race and how women of color are really who came in and saved the day. 17% of that electorate was black women who came in and told Roy Moore, "Not today. It's not going to happen." But we were underestimated in that case. And so when it comes to careers, or when it comes to, I say this to women who are starting their own businesses, you know, there's nothing wrong with being underestimated because people don't see you coming. And people can't stop what they don't see.
Ooh, that's quotable. People can't stop what they can't see. Hello. Say, "You go, girl."
You go, girl.
Yes.
So it's completely okay to own your power, but know that our power looks, feels, and impacts differently than that of the majority. And we don't always have to look for validation from that majority for our power to be where it's supposed to be.
Powerful, powerful. I remind you of the hashtag that's up. Please share it. So let me ask you, media. Maggie, you've been in media. What's the impact and what do women of color need to do to really make the media work for them?
I think they have to continue moving forward in it. We have to look into ownership rather than just being the person in front of the camera. Because it's intoxicating to be in front of the camera or in back of the mic, whatever the case may be. But we have to move toward ownership. As Roland Martin was saying last night, if you keep getting kicked out, then you have to be your own. I'm building a studio in my home right now so I can do my own podcast, and I already have friends that are coming to me saying, "Will you rent out your studio?" Well, yes, I will. Okay?
Yes.
And we'll negotiate on the time. So I'm doing that, you know, stepping up and owning my own. But at the same time, we have to put a management team together that may buy that radio station that's in jeopardy, or see if we can't get financing. But once again, it's having your finances already in place within yourself, so when you go and approach a group they can look at you and say, "Okay, she set the example." But we have to be in the place where we make the decisions about what goes on the air. Because the media to this point is still controlled mostly by white males. That's just a fact. And so we need to do that.
Are you using media, Her Excellency Thea? How do you use
Oh,
media?
absolutely. I think it's incredibly important today. I think media has given us a platform now more than ever, especially if you consider social media, to be the authors of our own stories and most importantly, our own history moving forward. Too often, to your point, I think other people have held the pen on our history, and now it's a chance for us to really use media as a medium for us to tell our own stories, tell our true and authentic stories, and make sure those stories are impacting and bringing along others who are coming next, so that we have a really clear trajectory as to how we're going to help the next generation of women of color get to where they need to be. So I always encourage it with our entrepreneurs.
Your Excellency, are you using media, and if so, how?
Yes, we are using media, and we have a saying in Africa. We have an African saying that says that until the lion learns to write, the story will always glorify the hunter. Because the hunter is the one that goes to tell the story. The hunter is the one that writes the story, because of course the lion cannot write. So we've got, like my colleagues have said here, we've got to learn to write our own stories. We've got to get ownership of the narrative. We've got to change the narrative. And to do with media, we do not have to rely on mainstream media. We now have the privilege, the blessings of social media. Any one of us in here can be a media carrier, can be somebody that can spread news. Yesterday, during the opening reception, they did say something that there was no, I think, if I heard correctly, no main media or mainstream media that came to cover the opening reception. And I looked around, and I whispered to my colleague who sat next to me. I said, if each and every person in this room was tweeting and going onto their social media talking about this, would cover more people, would have more viewers. If you can even go live on your own private mobile phone. We'll have more viewers, we'll have more people learn about what's going on at the Hope Global Forums. We do not have to wait for the media. Before I heard about the Black Panther and Wakanda, I saw all of that. The first place I saw that was Facebook. Was Facebook and Instagram, and everyone, all the reviews, what people thought. That was way before I got hold of a newspaper. That was way before I had time to sit down and listen to the news. So social media is very powerful. We can be our own media writers. We have to take that pen away from the hunter and write our own stories. And it's very easy to do that now. You do not have to own a studio. As long as you have your mobile phone, you can send out news.
So definitely tweet. Tell them you're at the most colorful forum. The 4 bad women up here. The sisters got it going on. We don't look like anybody else. We've got our color popping all on the stage. So tweet us out. Let them know that you're in this forum, and that's another way of spreading the word of what's happening up here. So now there's the word success, and then there's the word access. Why do we lack access, and how does a sister of color get more access?
Oh, you want me to start?
Anyone who wants to jump in.
Again, ownership. As she just said, it's building whether it's through social media or wherever the case may be, but owning our own rights. That's what's so important. We can't wait for somebody else to do it for us anymore. We have to do it ourselves. Create a platform for yourself, build it strong, and build it wide, because you have to have room for others to join with you. And once you are rolling up together, you'll continue to do that.
Yeah, Your Excellency?
I think I read somewhere that the women's economy is worth about $93 trillion.
93 trillion.
That is what I read
With a T,
somewhere.
okay.
With a T. With a T. What can we women do with that? How can we access that and be the ones to control that? We can't leave it to the men. We can't leave it to the men to make our shoes. We can't leave it to the men to make our dresses. We can't leave it to the men to make our household stuff. Women are the purchasers, the buyers, the consumers. We've got to turn that around because we have the capability and the possibility to be the designers of the things that we wear, to make the things or to bring the stuff onto the market, onto the economy that speak to the pain points of women. We run the household, we have to think, what can we eat? How do I want to decorate my house? But we go out, we have left it to the men to create all the things that we need and become consumers instead of producers so that we can get into that market, into that economy. And I think that's what we need to do.
I'm going to push it a little step further.
And it comes with access and success. Yesterday, I had Ambassador Andrew Young talking about getting onto the stock market in order to be in control of our own economy and our own finances. So that is another way to do that. When you create your own company, your own designer label, automatically you're going onto the stock market at some point. And of course, you're in control, and you have a huge chunk of that global economy.
Let me ask a question. I'm going to push it a little further. Ambassador Young was one of my mentors. When I became an ambassador, I called all the black people I know who had ever been ambassadors, and he was very generous with his time. But and I asked him what was his favorite job ever, and he said being mayor of Atlanta. And I asked him why. He said because Maynard Jackson had put in place everything, so when he became mayor, he just had to execute. So I want to talk about the word strategy. What's a sister strategy for this 21st century?
Well, I think one of the most important things we need to keep in mind is that every invitation is not the right invitation.
Say that again, girl.
Every invitation is not the right one. So I think in a world where we're so connected, that can create challenges, and that it presents so much of what seems like opportunity when we talk about access, and especially for us when we've often been completely left out of that pathway to access. We see these opportunities and we think, let's latch on to that, but everything is not the right opportunity for us. And so, I think we have to be very intentional about choosing opportunities that really align with your purpose, really align with your identity, really speak to your passion and what you are put on this earth to do, and making sure that you are following in a very clear and tactical strategy to ensuring that that is what is designed for you, and not just simply diluting your purpose and your passion with anything that comes your way that may not really be for you and really might not be in the best spirit for you as well.
That's a great answer. Great.
May I jump on
please.
What she just said?
Yes.
It's so important. It's like she said, everything may not be your exact strategy that you need, but what you need to do maybe is go in and learn as much as you can and then know when to exit. Because that's important too.
Yes.
When I hear people say, well, I only got 20 more years at this job, but I hate it, it's like, what are you there for? Because you're not giving 100%. So know when to move on.
That's a good word.
When I first started my career, every 2 years I was changing jobs. You know why? Because I'd gotten the most I could from there. Know when to leave, but have a strategy for your exit.
Woo!
Okay?
You go, girl.
Because that's important too. If that company had a 401k, find out if they have a Roth 401k. Because if you're there, then you can carry that on to someplace else. That could be your seed for your next move. And so it's always important to never just be sitting there, but learn what you can, make your networks, make your contacts, and then move on.
I love it, girl. That's it. That's it. Yes.
I think, as my colleague said, the first thing that you need to have to know your passion. I know there are a lot of women who are passionate about shoes. So you can go and create those shoes. You go and work in the shoe industry. If you're passionate about computers, you go and work in technology. If you're passionate about people and humanity, you become a humanitarian. So you start with the passion, and then you look around. What is it that is surrounding you? Where are the gaps? How can you fit in there? We are talking about trying to secure a 50-50 planet where we have the perspectives, 50% perspectives of men and 50% perspectives of women, or the feminine and the masculine perspective in 50% equal measures on every high-level decision-making process. So to do that, we have, you talked about strategy. We have to equip our young women and girls with the necessary skills, the knowledge, the tools, the networks, the global power networks of women movers and shakers that can mentor, inspire, and motivate these young women to be who they really want to be. The world at the moment requires feminine wealth. It requires the feminine spirit in order to upset the status quo, in order to take us back to where we need to be, because for a long time, the world has been run on the perspectives of men, including the economy. We found ourselves in 2018 economic crash. We had that after the World War as well. And the economy has always been run by men. And of course, they run on competition, instant gratification, and all of that. Women, we think about the community. How would this impact humanity if I were to do this? And that is what the world needs now. So we have to go back into ourselves. What talents do I have? Fall on your talents, fall on your passion. And then, as my colleague said, go and improve on that by getting educated to know what is there, how this game is being played at the moment, what kind of shoes are girls wanting to wear at the moment. You go and do that.
So now the chair, you can give her some love. That's good. That's great. So the chair of the Hope Global Forums this morning, Philippe Bourgognon,
Bourguignon. It's like beef bourguignon.
Thank you so much. Talked about robotics. You know, robots kind of replacing a lot of folk. Are we ready for the next step? Are we ready? Are we preparing women and girls for dealing technologically and scientifically with what's going to happen in terms of their future?
Well, STEM and STREAM are the two biggest things right now. And the more we know about computers, and if you don't know, go find somebody who can help you with it. My producer of my show is like just turned 29 or 30 years old.
Yes.
But you know what? She's smart. She knows how to build websites. She knows about social media and how to set it up. And, you know, just because you're old, you don't need to keep up with old friends. You know, you can be a mentor
Yes.
for a young person to help move them forward too. And at the same time, you're gaining. Because this is not just about one age, one time, one place. It's about all of us. And you've heard the honor say things, we've heard her. It's important for us to stick together,
Yes.
ladies, because we are the base of the world. We have the power. And we can continue to move this world and help change this world. We got to get involved in politics too.
That was, yeah, we're
Okay.
going to go there, yeah.
We have to get involved in politically, and don't be afraid to speak out. Because they need to see more of this all over the world. And now her country's already got this going.
Yeah, they got it going on already.
I'll remember the time I met Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Mhm.
Outstanding woman. But, you know, she said
The first female
thing
president of
Liberia.
Like,
Yeah. Well, one of the things she said to me, I said, what makes you happiest? She said, when I'm riding down the street and I see smiles on the faces and know that I am changing their world.
Mm.
Okay? She has a wonderful biography out, and then a second book that followed it. Go read it. Read about some of your successful leaders and read her book, Soul Sister.
Thank you. Listen to her. Oh. Turn to someone and say, be a game changer and a world changer. Look them in the eye and smile at them. Don't frown. Say, be a game changer and a world changer. You talked about collaboration and supporting each other. What's one way women can support what you're doing? Just give us one. I know there's zillions. Give us one thing women can do to support what you're doing.
Well, first of all, if you are a woman of color who is not supporting another woman of color in business, shame on you. Okay, seriously. There are just too many opportunities for us now to be connected. We talk about social media. I mean, access to entrepreneurs and ventures who are doing incredible work is at your fingertips. So please make sure you are financially supporting women of color in particular in business. It's a very, very hard, challenging landscape, particularly with women of color who are raising funds or raising capital. The fundraising landscape for women of color has been heartbreaking. I want you all to hear this and metabolize it. Less than 1% of women of color have received funding beyond the $1 million mark in this country. Not this year, not last year, collectively. There are 14 women of color in this country who have received funding beyond $1 million. not in the state of Georgia, not in Atlanta, nationwide.
Wow.
And that is just, it's heartbreaking. And the way we have to change that is, to your point, is to start to create more ownership opportunities for ourselves. So we have to own the equity funds that support women that look like us. We have to own the crowdsourcing platforms that support women that look like us. We have to own our ability to walk into the door of a brick and mortar location that is owned by a woman of color and support her. And that's something we all own right here today.
Very
is
much
that
so.
ability to be supportive of women of color, particularly in business.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, I do as much mentoring as I can. Somebody asked me if I can speak at a school, whatever the case, and through my church. We have young people's groups. Get involved. You know, this is our future. And we may not be exactly where we want to be, but by helping them, we are opening the doors for ourselves, too. We have to mentor.
Yeah.
We have to help young people, help show them the way, but also be a part of helping lead the way.
And we're going to have time for about 5 minutes of questions after Her Excellency answers. So if you can answer short, and then we're going to open the floor for you. We have time for maybe 3 or 4 questions.
Okay, I want to address the issue of science and technology and robotics. Somebody called Arvin Tovla once said, the illiterates of the future will not be those people that cannot read and write, but it will be the people that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. The world is
Say that one more time.
The illiterates of the future will not be those people that cannot read and write, but they will be those that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because we are now, the world keeps moving in phases. We are now moving into the 4th industrial revolution. So we've got to arm ourselves in our training, in our education. We've got to arm ourselves with the skills that can make us respond to the demands of the 4th industrial revolution.
Say that.
The way I look at it, for example, the generation before my mother could not read and write, and we considered them to be illiterate. And right now, when I see all these young girls coding and trying to do things on the computer, I can't do those. And I equate myself to those women that couldn't read and write. Because in a few years' time, if you cannot code, if you cannot get into STEM, if you cannot program or work a computer or a mobile phone, you will be the uneducated, you will be the illiterate of that era.
That's true. If you have a question, let's give her a hand. That's great. If you have a question, stand where you are, and we'll be able to take 4 questions. We have 1 there, 1 in the middle. We're going to take 1 from each section of the room. As they're coming, I have a professional speakers bureau. It's the only global professional speakers bureau owned by a black woman. It's called Charisma Speakers, charismaspeakers.com. So when you have a paid budget, when you have a budget, you can contact us. We do keynote speakers, and we provide experts all over the globe, particularly in counterterrorism and law enforcement. So when your union or your teachers organization is having their annual conference or convention, hire us to do your speaking. We're bad. All of us have the average 20 years speaking ability. And so please hire us. That's a way you can support a sister, and the economy continues to grow. We're good. Turn and tell somebody she's good. She's good. She's good. That's her game. That's her game. She's good at her game. Okay, so we have a question right here, and you can direct it to one or all. Short question and
Sure.
short answers, please.
Most definitely. Thank you all so much for your wisdom this morning. One of the things someone commented about some folks being selfish. For me, it's just the opposite. I've been selfless, and that's been a problem. Mother of 4, recently divorced after 29 years. I find it difficult to focus on self and to really be able to hone my skills and my development. So I guess I would love to hear, and you all have given me a lot of jewels this morning. I appreciate that, and more empowered and more energized and rejuvenated from it. But as a 53-year-old woman, it's difficult sometimes to know how to navigate in the 21st century. So I just want to know if you all could give some thoughts or some advice on how I can be maybe a little bit more selfish.
In terms of self-care, or you want to take it?
Well, I was going to say, check for networking groups within your community. I don't know where you live. And, there got to be groups here. Or, get involved with, build your own support group if you can't find one. Because that's so important, taking the time to love yourself. Because that's where the foundation begins with loving yourself. I'm not saying excessive love, because you've had your time with your 4 kids. Woo, that's more than I do. But that's what you have to do. And find a support group, because they're out there.
Very, very much so. I have a book called Becoming a Woman of Destiny, and it talks about creating your destiny circle, surrounding yourself with people like yourself. And for all of you, at the last weekend in September, we have a self-care retreat in Palm Beach. It's called Selah by the Sea. That word Selah from the Bible means just stop. Turn to somebody, you got to stop sometime. And so if you go to Charisma Speakers, the flyers there, it's a powerful time for women leaders to come together, take a break so that you can have your action plan afterwards. But you have to take a break or you will break.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, we got
Yes.
a finger up here.
You know, when you get onto an aeroplane, before it takes off and they explain to you what you need to do, they always emphasize, before you put the oxygen mask on anybody else, make sure you've put it on yourself first, even if we are with your baby. So that responds to the notion of looking after number 1. Because if you cannot look after yourself adequately, all the people that depend on you will suffer. Even with the 4 children, you've got to find something that takes your interest, that's just your own. In doing so, you'll be able to look after your children adequately and with a lot of love. So it's not really about being selfish, but just about looking after yourself.
Self-care.
Finding time for yourself and doing something that you feel passionate about yourself. And then the love and the positive energy will spill over to your children and to everything else around you. You will no longer feel suffocated by just having 4 children. There are women who've got 13 children and they still do a lot of things.
Okay, so we're going to take another question. Repeat after me. I am somebody. I need self-care. I need self-love. All right. Where's our next question?
I'm sorry, we have a question in the back here.
Okay. Where's the mic there?
Hi, my name's Robin Bradford, and I have my own company called The Power People Brokers, which has extended to Real Women, Real Talk. And looking at the title, Leaning In as a Woman of Color, can we go a little bit deeper and talk about just being black and how important that is? Because as women, as black women, we tend to sublet our ideas and our story to the masses of women, and we get lost in the challenge.
What's your specific question?
So can you speak to the fact that can we start a nucleus within and then branch out?
Want to tackle it?
Well, once again, it's kind of like self-love and also building your foundation, knowing who you are and what direction you want to go, and in a sense, never deviating from it, but also continuing to educate yourself so you can get to the next level. I'll keep my answer brief.
Okay. We have a question right here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Tanja Kabir. I'm from Macon, Georgia. Thank you guys for your time. My question is, when you're
Can you speak up just a little bit more?
I'm sorry. When you're in the boardroom or when you're dealing with different people and you experience discrimination or microaggressions, I'm wondering, how do you deal with it? Do you confront it head on? Do you wait for a little time and kind of mention it here or there? How do you deal with it as a strategy, as a black woman in this era?
That's a whole nother workshop in itself. So I'm going to say one lesson from the boardroom or from the locker room, in your case, that you've learned.
Well, I always say don't try and continue the argument or the aggression within that room. Go after that meeting and talk to that person directly. Because it's not the whole board's fight, it's yours. And let them know where you stand. And, they cannot like it or not, if they're going to fire you, they're going to fire you anyway. And that may be part of it. But don't continue that fight on that site. Make it one-on-one. And if that's not the problem that can be solved, then perhaps you need to go to HR if you're working at a company.
Anybody want to add to that for me?
Yeah, I would just add on to that. I think that's absolutely spot on. But making sure you are thinking through strategically how to handle the situation in the best way. It might not be in that exact moment that you are able to address it, especially to be able to address it with grace and with an ability to articulate it with dignity in the way that you would want to in order to see impact, right? I would think in that very moment, though, you need to be thinking about what is the outcome that you're hoping for. If it's just a display of racism and aggression that has no real benefit for you to even tackle in that room, don't waste your time with it. We've got enough to do, that you don't need to waste your time in spaces where it's not going to produce an outcome for you that could be beneficial to your particular career trajectory or path.
And on the retreat, we're going to spend 3 days dealing with some of that. So if you can come, that's another time. We have time for one last question, and we're sorry this is the time we had, so we wanted to get as much in. So where is it? Right here on this side. Okay.
Oh, can we do two?
We have time for 2 more then?
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Good morning, good afternoon. I can't remember at this point. My name is Tiffany. One request from the audience. When you guys respond, could you say your name one more time and social media handle so people can share it out on the internet? And then my question is, I work in philanthropy where I have the opportunity to support entrepreneurs of color that are building organizations to solve the world's biggest problems. And oftentimes I tell people, don't start a nonprofit. Simply because we're all fighting for the same dollars. How can we encourage women entrepreneurs to really find that X-ray vision to find what is the gap in the industry and not to create a new organization that is cannibalizing the funding? How can we support each other instead of creating something new that we're all attacking and looking for that same funding? So I would just encourage folks to think about it from that perspective as well.
That's a great question. You need each of our names again, or the audience when they're speaking? Okay. I'm Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook with a Z, S-U-Z-A-N, Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook, or Ambassador Sujay is my hand, at Ambassador Sujay is my handle. S-U-J-A-Y is how we spell Sujay. And your name?
I'm Thea Smith, and my handle's Linda is on my team, and she can, Atlanta W-E-I, or is it the opposite? W-E-I Atlanta. W-E-I Atlanta.
Okay, but just for your knowledge, her name is Thea, spelled T-H.
T-H-E-I-A.
Okay. Thank you. And your name, Your Excellency?
Justina Mutale, and that's my Twitter handle. It's @Justina Mutale, spelled Justinamutale.
Okay, and your name?
I'm Maggie Linton, and on Twitter I'm @LintonMaggie.
And spell your Linton.
Linton.
Because we're in Holy Week, so they may think it's L-E-N-T-E-N.
I know.
So.
Yeah, I get that. And I get Litton, and I said, oh, I wish I had that money.
So does anyone want to answer that question quickly in terms of how do we not just create another nonprofit that takes more funding away, or what's the route? Quickly, somebody want to answer that?
I think rather than thinking that another nonprofit is taking money from, what I have seen recently, I work in international development, is that funders are looking more to funding consortiums or partnerships, if you work in partnerships rather than work in silos.
Yes.
So rather than thinking that those people are your competition for the same money, you could just team up together to apply the funding, and you get even more funding because you're a bigger group. That gives you leverage rather than being a small silo organization.
Exactly. So for Pro Voice International, we do collaborations, connections, celebrations, and conversations, so that we're working together as women leaders who are heads of many nonprofits, but we're an umbrella to have that collaborative spirit. And the final question for the day, please.
Thank you for taking my question. I lived in Liberia for 4.5 years, and I'd like to know, how can we form alliances among us as women of African descent and African women to create an economic vehicle by which we all can benefit?
Woo!
We're all looking at you. How was it done?
Okay, yesterday we had the discussion about money, and how money gives you that leverage on anything. You have to work with somebody, and they have to decide how much they pay you. If they don't pay you, you and your children suffer. And I think we had some of this in the opening plenary this morning. I mentioned our project on the African Women's Development Bank. If we can create a development bank, it could also be a funding bank for women's businesses. That is something that we can work on, and if we have that clout, we'll be as big as the World Bank or even bigger than they are.
Say it, girl. I love it. That's it. That's it. My mantra for the 21st century is strategize, monetize, globalize. and we can work it together. If you take it, give me credit, just SUZAN. But strategize, monetize, globalize. Won't you join me in just thanking these dynamic, got it going on sisters, Thea Smith, the Honorable Her Excellency Justina Matale, the Honorable Maggie Linton, and the super bad got it going on, the bomb, Ambassador Susan Come, I can't hear y'all.